Simon, an online conference begins today where one Arsene Wenger will address and invite every national team manager to discuss his plans. Despite a planned vote in December on the post-2024 international calendar changes, this could be the week that is make or break for Wenger's and FIFA's biannual World Cup plan. Gareth Southgate, incidentally, is not attending. He's already spoken with Wenger, but the FA chief, Mark Bullingham, is going to sit in for him instead. Anyway, enough from me. Let's find out what's going on with it. AP's global news correspondent, Rob Harris, is right across it. Rob, good morning to you. Tell us what is going on within this online conference and what you expect to hear further down the line today.
Yeah, good morning, guys. This is the latest step in FIFA's attempted consultation to win support for these plans for biennial World Cups. Yesterday, I was talking to the from American World Cup winning coach Jill Ellis. She's been hired on the women's side of the game to try to consult there. Those plans are less advanced. On the men's side of the game, FIFA really stepping up the pace. The fact that they've got these meetings today and again on Thursday with the men's national team coaches, and we've seen criticism of these plans already across Europe. Didier Deschamps saying that it would trivialise the World Cup, holding it every 2 years. And we heard Gareth Southgate at the start of September saying he was a bit open-minded then more recent weeks, thinking actually, having heard more, the plans keep on changing, doesn't see they make sense, particularly over the change, the reconfiguration of the international calendar. And Gareth Southgate won't be taking part in these calls with Arsene Wenger, who is, of course, now the FIFA chief of global football development. And instead, the FA believe it's a matter for Mark Bullingham as CEO to consult on before they really come to a wider corporate view.
Seems strange, doesn't it, that Southgate doesn't want to play ball in this, but Bullingham might.
Yeah, and Bullingham's going to be taking part in their FIFA calls as well. I think Gareth Southgate's obviously already heard the plans over a month ago from from Arsene Wenger, so he already knows what is being envisaged. And the core component of these plans from Wenger are not only holding the World Cup every 2 years, but potentially a continental championship in the alternate years as well. So every summer, some form of tournament in June and July. And one of the most contentious things is reducing those international windows from the 5 currently to just potentially the 2, the one in the summer for the tournaments, and then October, November, a single big month-long block, rather than players going off for their countries in September, October, and November, and of course again in March. And this is a particular area of contention for Gareth Southgate because, he's pointing out, what about players not actually making those squads in October, November? And, I've heard it, speaking around the game, some smaller federations in particular saying that actually, if you only have your games in October, November, your cash flow is very much centered on that period. And also you're trying to attract fans just for the games rather than being spread out across the year as well. And also the fact a player could get injured, or multiple players, important players for teams, could get injured in that October, November period when the qualifiers will be played. And that could really jeopardize a team's chance of making a tournament.
So, Rob, basically, Simon's going to come in on this in a second, but is there anything to stop FIFA taking this to a vote and virtually railroading it through, and Wenger gets his way?
That's exactly the word used by UEFA a few weeks ago, railroaded. They think that FIFA are trying to railroad through these plans. Gianni Infantino is on a global tour at the moment. Yesterday, he was in Argentina. He was in the Middle East last week, and he's really trying to build up support from around the world. UEFA leading the opposition, along with Common Ball as well. But if FIFA was to put this to a vote of its members, 211, they'd very much be sure, it seems, of a majority. They've already got 160 odd backing the consultation process. And something I asked Jill Ellis yesterday is whether or not the vote should be separated, a separate vote on a men's World Cup every 2 years and a women's World Cup every 2 years, because a lot of the countries, maybe only 3/4 actually have women's teams anyway. So they'd be voting for something that wouldn't even impact them. And perhaps they'd gain financial benefits from more frequent women's World Cups. But as it does seem now, Gianni Infantino is pushing ahead with it. Could there be some sort of compromise? There is talk around maybe this is all about pushing it to the extreme. But actually, in the end, maybe there isn't a World Cup every 2 years, but we come back to this plan discussed a few years ago of a global Nations League. So that still would ensure more games between the elite nations more often, more competitive games, and perhaps wouldn't seem as bad, and it wouldn't dilute the value of the World Cup. Of course, what sort of value would these games have? And of course, Arsene Wenger says it's all about trying to create more meaningful matches rather than the qualifiers at the moment, which can be pretty routine. We've got England, the Lionesses playing Women's World Cup qualifiers as well this week. You would think that they're strongly placed to make the finals in 2023 in Australia and New Zealand. Interestingly, when we talk about the FA, well, Gareth Southgate has now started to be critical. Mark Bullingham is yet to give an FA position. From the women's side of the FA, the WSL division, they are against these plans because they believe there'd be an impact on the WSL. Other European women's leagues have said that. I interviewed England's new women's national team manager, Sarina Wiegman, a month ago, and she was opposed to a World Cup every 2 years as well. Of course, she reached the final with the Netherlands in 2019. She believes that there's an impact on player welfare. It's already... Right. It congests enough the calendar.
Well, I mean, you have to wonder, Simon, is anybody for this? You get Infantino in the Middle East, now he's in Argentina, drumming up support. Yeah. Wenger's banging the drum, but who wants it?
Well, and as Rob has alluded to, you hear people that are managing World Cup winning countries, that have been World Cup winners as players, like Didier Deschamps, that don't see the benefit of this. When we talk about railroading this and we talk about their ability to get this through, Jim's just sort of advanced the point, which I was going to advance, is, well, who is actually in favour for this? I was of the understanding that the South American powerhouses were absolutely against it. The Europeans are against it. So who is it that's going to hold the votes to be able to get them to a point where it can be railroaded through, if that is the right terminology?
Well, we're seeing support from parts of Asia, from Africa, even the French Federation.
The developing countries, I understand, but why do they have the votes over and above the Europeans and the South Americans?
Well, I mean, this is a very interesting thing about FIFA and its democratic process and how it's set up. The fact one member, one vote, all 211 associations have equal voting, which has obviously helped presidents over so many years. In other sports, we see it weighted, perhaps in Test cricket towards the Test
nations. How many votes do we have in Europe then?
There's 55 from the nations and 54 in Africa. So the two biggest confederations.
And how many in South America?
There's the 10, and we have had the statement from CONMEBOL coming out in opposition to these plans. And same time, they've announced a new partnership with UEFA for a game between the champions of each confederation starting next year, a joint office opening in London.
And how many votes of the 211, Rob, require it to be passed?
Well, that's what we're actually trying to still nail down, whether it is actually just a simple majority or it does need...
Is it first past the post mentality?
Yeah, exactly. And FIFA haven't exactly been very clear on this. We do have a FIFA council meeting taking place tomorrow. So we're expecting it to be discussed there and hopefully hearing from Gianni Infantino after that more. But we've not had much clarity on the process. It will be in December when it goes through.
When do we see, if this were to be passed, which I don't think it will be, I think there's a stalking horse, I think it's a sprat to catch a mackerel, they can't get what they want, so hitting people hard with the fear factor of getting a World Cup every 2 years and there'll be a trade-off and they'll get something else in its place, like most things in football. But if it were to be a biennial World Cup, when were they suggesting that would start?
Well, again, limited detail there. Obviously, 2028 would be the first potential date, but now UEFA have started the bidding process for the Euro 2028 just in the last couple of weeks, inviting expressions of interest. And if they were to have it in 2028, that would put it in direct conflict immediately with the Los Angeles Olympics. And
there you go.
There was an interesting statement last weekend, quite unprecedented in IOC terms, really speaking out against FIFA's plans. And the IOC saying their president, Thomas Bach, hasn't been properly consulted by Gianni Infantino. They're talking about the impacts on other sports because every tournament would feature a World Cup. It would monopolize a lot of the space other sports benefit from. And actually, also talking about impact on player welfare, the fact so many more games. And also they believe it would damage the women's game as well because growth because
sounds very well thought out then.
Exactly. We don't want Thomas Bach getting to his feet.
But we've got Arsene Wenger involved, so that means it must happen.
I remember going to an event that Thomas Bach spoke at. Rob, my goodness, he could put an aspirin to sleep. Well, I mean, we shall wait to see what happens, but at the moment the IOC are against it. As you say, many managers are against it. The South Americans are against it. It's going to be a close-run thing, but there's no way of telling if Wenger is going to win the day or not win the day.
Well, he's certainly got Gianni Infantino trying to get him to push through these plans. He's really trying to gather support. And it's all, it seems, about FIFA trying to get a greater say on the global game. They would see it as reconfiguring to the benefit of players, to give them more opportunities to go to tournaments more often, to be able to experience World Cups. But there's no guarantee, as someone like Wenger says, that just because you hold the World Cup more often, more countries will get the chance to qualify. And of course, from 2026, it is expanding to 48 teams from 32 now. But obviously, so many of these countries don't necessarily qualify. And what we're seeing in the bigger picture as well is the sense of FIFA wanting to, be ever more powerful. Gianni Infantino on his tours in the last couple of weeks has been pushing this idea of another Middle East World Cup, with Israel potentially hosting with the UAE jointly. Many have often said that FIFA is often seeking the Nobel Peace Prize, and some of the statements can often seem like that when they talk about trying to bring countries together and how football can unite and heal. So trying to elevate the status of football in the game. But certainly this has really picked another fight between FIFA and UEFA, and has created this hugely contentious point where you've got players against it, coaches against it, and even the other week, Thierry Henry pointing out why is so many ex-players being consulted? They're not the ones who are currently in the game at the moment, and we've not heard from necessarily many in the game at the moment. Courtois last week, obviously pointing out the ever number of increasing number of matches. And then mixed it all, one thing Arsene Wenger told national associations on a recent call was maybe there won't just be a World Cup with 48 teams, but a secondary World Cup for those that don't qualify.
Oh, for God's sake.
I think they need, looking into it as I'm talking to you, I think they need 140 votes. I think if they get 140 out of the 210, that will determine whether the World Cup direction changes.
Okay.
I'm looking at it now. They require when it was 209 states in FIFA, it's now 211. They required 139 votes.
Okay.
Yes, the 3/4 of the membership, and that's what it seems they could actually get.
2/3.
All right.
2/3,
as long as Infantino continues to get his passport stamped, that's all that matters. Rob, thank you so much for joining us. Rob Harris there with the very latest on Wenger's plan for this biennial World Cup. You for it or against it? I can't remember.
Against it, Jimbo.
Of course you are.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Thursday morning, 10 till 1. On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.